Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Goldstein, and I am really honored to have this opportunity to introduce James and Karla Murray. Last month, their photographs appeared as the second exhibition in our newly relaunched Freedman Gallery on the mas.org. When we first conceived this new digital art space last year, James and Karla's photographs were already on my mind. With this gallery, we're seeking to highlight artists who are either based in New York or inspired by New York City, whose work deepen our understanding of the relationship between people and the built environment. Few artists have done more in the last decade to lift up the stories of New York neighborhood life than James and Karla. From their earliest work to the blockbuster debut of their first book, Storefront NYC, James and Karla have captured, paid tribute to, and memorialized one of the most beloved elements of urban life, the local retail and small business owners who enliven New York City streets. Their photographs are art pieces of enormous beauty in and of themselves. Even if you've never been in New York City and walked the streets of the Lower East Side, you can feel the essence of these unique places. These artworks oblige you to look deeply and see something that only a trained and talented set of eyes can bring home. In addition, their photographs inspire celebration and appreciation for these businesses, and their advocacy seeks to address the more difficult realities facing mom and pop shops today, long before COVID-19's pandemic and shutdown added yet more pressure on this essential local infrastructure. Now more than ever during this holiday season, when many New Yorkers are sticking close to home, we have to proactively support the businesses who have persevered through all these challenges. I am sure many of us sat with New York Magazine's cover story this week on small businesses lost during the pandemic. James and Karla helped bring that tribute to life. I am reminded, though, in a way, it is easy to mourn the things we've lost. What takes effort is committing to support and save the businesses still with us. Inspired by James and Karla and all they've done, I'm making an extra commitment this year to do my part to invest in the local retail in my neighborhood of Jackson Heights and in some of your neighborhoods as well. And I hope you'll do the same. And speaking of thoughtful giving, both this new digital gallery and its original programming at the Villard Houses have been made possible through the generosity of the Freedman family, and we thank them. Before we begin, I'd like to draw your attention to the chat where the MAS team has placed some helpful tips and details. I would also like to highlight there's a Q&A button down on the bottom of your screen. There you can share any questions, and James and Karla will take time towards the end of the program to answer them. And one final note before we get started. We'll be doing a random drawing of 2 names in the audience to each win a signed copy of one of James and Karla's Storefront books. And we'll be reaching out to the winners by email following the program. So please stay with us. And now I am proud to welcome the artists themselves. Here are James and Karla Murray.
There we are.
Okay, I hope our video is started.
Good morning.
Does everything look okay on your end? Ayana, yes, just let us know if everything is good as far as the video. Yes, perfect. So here we go. Well, thank you, first of all, everyone, for joining us on our gallery talk about our show, Open for Business, The Art of the Storefront, which is currently on display at the Municipal Art Societies of New York's Doris C. and Alan J. Freedman Gallery. For those who are not familiar with our work, we're going to briefly discuss how we first came to document these small businesses and what we hope to accomplish by highlighting our photographs of these gems and the stories behind them. For over 20 years, we've scoured the city to find mom and pop businesses, from humble neighborhood stores tucked away on narrow side streets to well-known institutions on historic avenues. Over 85% of the 325 stores that we photographed for our first book, Storefront, The Disappearing Face in New York, which was published in 2008, have already disappeared. And even in our more recent publication, Storefront 2, A History Preserved, which was published in 2015, over 30% of the stores we photographed have now closed. Many traditional mom and pop neighborhood storefronts that have prevailed for some cases in over a century are rapidly disappearing in the face of modernization and conformity. And the once unique appearance and characters of New York's colorful streets are suffering in the process. And this year, it's even more important than ever to support your local mom and pops, because so many are also closing down due to the coronavirus pandemic, the shutdown and everything surrounding it. So to us, the neighborhood stores have always been a foothold, like for new immigrants, and a comfortable place where familiar languages are spoken, where ethnic foods and cultures are present. And they're lifelines for the communities, vital, really vital to the residents who depend on them for a multitude of needs. And when these shops fail, the neighborhood is severely affected. They set the pulse, life, and texture of their communities. And now we're going to highlight some of the stores that, you are not familiar with, perhaps because they're not going to be in the online gallery, which you can look at later if you haven't already, but they're still open for business and desperately need your support, especially now because of the coronavirus pandemic. So if you cue to the next slide, Ayanna. Oh yeah, there's our storefront books, which, by the way, please stay tuned to the end of the program, because as Elizabeth told everybody, they're going to be doing a giveaway of signed copies of these books. And to us, not only is the actual storefront photo a work of art in and of itself, as you can see, those two cover photos, we love them. But we also interviewed the owners of these mom and pop businesses, and the stories that they had to share about the joys and struggles of owning and operating oftentimes a small family-owned business are equally important, if not more important than the photo themselves. So yeah, let's get started and show some beautiful businesses that you can help support. The first one,
one of our favorites,
definitely one of our favorites, is C.O. Bigelow Apothecaries. And this is located on 6th Avenue in Greenwich Village. So it's in the heart of Greenwich Village.
Beautiful sign.
Yes. And it was established in 1838, making it the oldest apothecary in America, which is, like, to us, really incredible. The third generation owner, Ian Ginsberg, told us that he worked at the apothecary, as a young boy, and actually used to stand on a crate behind the pharmacy counter to greet customers because he couldn't see over the counter. So he had to stand on a little crate.
Yeah, and they let him fill the little jelly containers.
Yeah, the little jelly cups behind the soda fountain, because they had a soda fountain at the time. A lot of pharmacies also acted as like a little soda fountain.
Like a lunch counter.
Yeah, so it was like really kind of like your local meeting spot. I mean, I would say probably it was like an ad hoc community center in a lot of ways.
Right.
And interestingly, that soda fountain, even though they don't serve like egg creams and stuff like that anymore, they still use it for their cosmetics. Yeah. So it's really great. That's where, like, the workers will be behind the cosmetics counter, but that was the soda fountain counter. So anyway, back to C.O. Bigelow. Many of the items that they sell were formulated in the 1800s, including their signature cold creams, body creams, and salves. And I can tell you personally that we love their lemon body cream. That's what I use. It's really great. It's all natural, like, ingredients, and extra good. And also Ian shared with us that many of their customers have been returning for years, because it's like a totally different experience than any other pharmacy. Everything they sell there is based on assisted sales. It's not just like you walk in and you go to all the products lined up on the shelves in the aisles, where if you have a cold, you're directed to aisle 1. No, that's not the way it happens at Bigelow. They speak to their customers, they ask them what they need and how they can help them make their appropriate selection.
Yeah, there's all cool, like, wooden ladders along the side of the store.
Yeah, the rolling ladders to get things from up high.
Right.
It's a beautiful, and when you first enter the store, make sure that you look down at the floor, because they have beautiful tile floor, and inscribed on it is C.O. Bigelow, in hand-laid tile. So, it's those little things like that in the interior which obviously we're not showing you with this storefront photo, but it's worth a trip inside just to see that gorgeous interior. They also formulate custom prescriptions and flavor medicines for children and dogs on the premises. And I can tell you that we have a dog, his name is Hudson, and we brought him in there many times. They also give him little biscuits
Yeah,
and
they have little treats. for him.
always big pets. So that's super nice. They've had many famous customers over the years, including Mark Twain and Eleanor Roosevelt. I mean, that's how old they are.
Yeah, we've seen them.
No, not Mark Twain.
No, we're not that old.
Yeah, exactly. So, in fact, they still have Mark Twain's purchase receipts for medicine in their scrapbook. Like they have a scrapbook of like many of their old customers, because everything was written by hand then. You know, nothing was done on the computer. Everything was just like written little hand notes. And it's really cool to see that scrapbook. So,
and they have a store cat.
Yes, and yes, you are right. And the store cat's name is Allegra. Interestingly enough, it's because the owner, Ian Ginsberg, in a strange like twist, is allergic to cats. So he has to take Allegra, the anti-allergy medicine to be around the cat. So look for Allegra. She's often hanging out either in the front window.
Right.
You're like pawing at the display, I guess. Sleeping. Or up top, they actually have a little balcony level, like where the office is and everything like that. So she's like on the staircase, looking down on all the customers.
Just a beautiful place inside. I mean,
exactly. So let's cue up the next slide. Another one of our favorites. I mean, people ask us all the time, like, what is your favorite storefront? And that's like
pretty impossible.
Yeah, it's an impossible question to answer. It's kind of like saying, what's your favorite child?
Right.
But this is definitely one of our favorites. It's Mansoura Pastries. And you may not be familiar with this one, but it's located on Kings Highway by East 3rd Street. And that's in Brooklyn, in the Midwood section of Brooklyn. And it's been in business since 1961, which doesn't sound like, I mean, that's old, but it's not that old. But their baking legacy actually began in 1780, when the Mansoura family had a well-known bakery and confectionery shop in Aleppo, Syria, and then Cairo, Egypt, for close to 175 years.
And they had a famous customer.
Yes, King Farouk was a famous customer. And then what happened was the family left Egypt because of war and instability, and eventually settled in Brooklyn and Midwood. And Josiane Mansoura, the second generation owner, is the person that we were able to interview when we went there. And actually, her children are also working with her. So it's the 3rd generation as well. And to us, we really, I mean, at first, when we saw this storefront, not only did we think it was beautiful, but, we really loved that sign, like Mansoura's Oriental Pastry. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. What kind of stuff do they sell there? I mean, can we get like a, what's that?
Egg roll.
No, the cookie, the big cookie that they sell. They have those cookies like in Chinese New Year. I forget the name, mooncake.
Mooncake, that's it. Yep.
So that's what we were thinking was served at Mansoura's Oriental Pastry. So when we spoke with Josiane, she said, yes, the shop's old sign, Mansoura's Oriental Pastry, refers to the Middle Eastern area where my family originated from. Because as soon as we got in the shop, and actually when we looked in the window, we realized that they did not sell.
We're on the wrong track.
They did not sell mooncakes. When the store opened in 1961, Josiane's father-in-law translated the French word for Middle East, which is Moyen Orient, and called the shop Mansoura's Oriental Pastry in order to describe the type of pastries that were sold there. Americans like us thought the word Oriental referred to Chinese, but really, she said, the word Orient refers to the land in the Near East, the Far East, and the Middle East.
Right.
People that are not familiar with us even think that we sell Chinese pastries, which obviously, we're like, yes, we were,
and in the era of the phone book, they would put them under Chinese restaurants. Right.
She told us that they had to, call up the phone company because they put them under the Oriental heading in the yellow pages. And they had to explain to them, no, even though our name says Oriental, that's not the Oriental that you're thinking of. That's not what categorizes our business. Right. So please change it out of the Oriental heading in the phone book. Yeah. And we just thought that was like the greatest story. We're like, oh my God, we can picture that. Yeah. Well, like we picture people calling up, like trying to order, egg rolls, like you said, and chop suey or something like that.
Right.
So their specialty actually is their classic pistachio baklava. And I can tell you that it is,
Right.
I mean,
Awesome.
absolutely delightful. And homemade confections and chocolates. And they're the only place left in New York City that specializes in that type of pastry, because that's truly their specialty. They've told us that they have customers that have been buying their goods from their family for hundreds of years, because they ship everywhere in the world. And that's how they've survived. And I'm sure that this is more important than ever because of the coronavirus pandemic. That's how they survived the coronavirus pandemic, because I still believe, I know for that they did not have walk-in customers, and I still believe that they may not be open for walk-in customers, but I mean, we haven't been to Midwood in a while, so I can't be sure of that, but they're definitely open for business. I checked on that, you know, through their online website, and they ship all over the world. And Josiane told us that their stuff ships so well because their pastries have no dairy in it. So it's honey and sugar that acts as a natural preservative.
Yes,
so that's why it actually can ship really well. So yeah, I mean, to us,
a great place,
this was a really amazing story, really amazing storefront, everything about it. So yeah, next slide. There we go. This is Morsha's Pork Store. Now, this is a perfect example of how we were initially attracted to the storefront signage. Because for us, like the project, when we first started documenting these mom and pop stores,
extremely visually driven.
It was definitely very visually driven. We would walk around, we'd pick a neighborhood to walk around at, and then we'd be like, oh, look at that place. It has a beautiful, you know, sign or beautiful hand painted sign in the window.
Fell in love with the aesthetics of it.
It was definitely the visual aesthetics. But this particular store is not only like that we were attracted to the storefront signage, but then we went inside and we spoke with the owner and we learned the fascinating history about the origins and process of making the specialty meats that this shop sells. And the story to us became like just as important, if not more important than the visual aesthetics of the storefront. So back to Morsha's Pork Store. Now this, we're kind of taking you on a trip around the boroughs of New York City. So we started with Manhattan, then we went to Brooklyn, and now we're in Queens. This is on Catalpa Avenue by Woodward Avenue in Ridgewood, Queens.
Not the easiest place to get to.
Right. I mean, we're giving you the two cross streets, Catalpa by Woodward, because when you're walking, I mean, if you're driving, I don't even know. That's probably
like if you take an Uber there, they're probably going to end up backing down a one-way street.
Yeah, because it's like a one-way street and it leads, it's not off a main street. It's like, it's kind of difficult. So now that you know about it, you can look up the best way to get there. But of course, we just walked there and we were just blown away when we found out all its interesting history. It was founded by Joseph Morsher in 1957, and it's a family butcher shop. And it's known for its homemade sausages and meat specialties originating from Gatschi, which is a German enclave in Slovenia. And its neon signage, which we're big fans of neon, is original. And the whimsical little drawing with the German writing, you can see it when you're looking at that storefront. Look to the left of the Morsha's Pork Store neon. You can see Tischlen Deck Dish. And I might not be saying it right because honestly, I did not take German in high school. And so I'm probably saying it all wrong, but you can get the picture of it. It's to that left of the store's name.
Little guy at a table.
It translates roughly to little table spread thyself. And it's taken from the Brothers Grimm fairy tale story, The Wishing Table, the Gold Ass, and the Cudgel in the Sack, which is in reference to like the magic table which sets itself. So we were intrigued by that. Like when we were like, well, what does that mean? What is that little guy? What does that got to do with a pork store? So we went in and that's how we found out. We spoke with Herbert Morsher, who shared with us, I mean, he's the second generation owner, that they use the same old fashioned recipes handed down through the generations in their family, mixed with the state-of-the-art high-tech meat processing machinery for smoking and aging. They upgrade their kitchen throughout the years to keep up with the times. And he said this is very important to their family to maintain the old standards, but then to move into the 21st century. Because honestly, I think that is probably the key to their success, because he told us that if they had stayed with the same way of manufacturing meat products that, this family did back in Slovenia, they would have been banana business long ago, because their old system was 5 men working 5 days a week for long hours you know, at their shop just to prepare all the meat in the kitchen. It was very labor intensive. And he said, now they only have 2 men working in the kitchen 2 days a week, and they're putting out twice as much product. So that's, you know, a tale of definitely changing with the times, like really helped them. And they told us still to this day, they don't use any artificial smoke like most large meat processors, but instead their equipment uses real smoke from hickory, apple, and cherry tree wood chips that impart that special like smoky flavor that they're known for. And I can tell you, as soon as you walk into the store, you smell that blend of hickory, apple, and cherry tree wood chips. I mean, we couldn't place like what the wood chips were, but when he told us, we're like, oh yeah, that's what that delightful smell is.
Yeah, when they're smoking, you can actually, when you get home, you smell it all in your clothes.
Yes, it's like
it stays with you.
It goes in the fabric somehow. And Herbert told us that his high-tech smoker machines cost between $50,000 to $70,000 each, and that was back in like I think it was like around 2012 or 2013 when we went there.
Right.
And they're environmentally friendly because everything is contained and no smoke comes out of the into the kitchen or outside the store even. And he said when his father's cousin first opened the store, he was actually using fire pits in the back of the kitchen to smoke the meat, and a rail system like to, you know, move all the sausages around and meat on the racks. And when he invited us in the back to show us, like they still had that old rail system, and he showed us like the new modern machinery. It was really awesome to see. Right. And he said the equipment also controls the humidity of the meat, because
this is the coolest thing.
Keeping the constant humidity said is super, super important part of the aging process for their meat. Their recipes date back to their ancestors who actually stored meat in the Alps to keep a constant humidity. They would know like where in the mountains to put the meat during different times, months of the year, because he said at certain altitudes, the temperature and humidity remain steady, you know, throughout the year. So we couldn't believe that.
Yeah, they would actually carry the meat up to these different sheds up and down the mountain.
Yeah, so we're like, oh my God.
Depending on the humidity.
Right, that's incredible.
So that's what the machines do. They
mimic that.
Mimic that because there's no mountains.
Right, he said that, you know, they would just, you know, move the meat up and down the mountains to count, you know, for the rise and fall of the temperatures and the humidity. But he said, like here in New York, you know, we don't have that luxury. You know, we're at sea level, and you know, so the humidity has to be controlled through their modern machinery. Years ago, he said, when they first opened the store in the late 1950s, that they would actually have to throw away entire batches of like 500 pounds of meat because the humidity would fluctuate so greatly, especially in the warmer months. You know, like in the summertime, it would get so hot and humid that they would have to throw it away because it just, you know, sadly, you know, that's just
it would be all wrong.
Part of business, doing business. So when they, you know, upgraded to their modern machinery, that was, you know, huge for them. They said the busiest times of the year are like right now, Christmas time and Easter.
Because, it's like a war room.
Yeah, he said people want to get together with their families and have a taste of the old world for their Tyrolerwurst, their bratwurst, and Weisswurst. And like, hearing that, we worry about them now because we know with the coronavirus pandemic that, you know, people can't gather in large groups. So we hope that people are still supporting this business, even if you can only, you know, have 2 or 3 members of your family at a time sitting around and eating their product.
They have a beautiful window display too.
Oh yeah. And they also sell lots of pickled cabbage because he said their customers make stuffed cabbage dishes oftentimes during the holidays, or homemade sauerkraut to go with their sausages. So they sell the stuffed cabbages. They in fact cure the cabbage. He showed it to me in their basement and then put them in the big refrigerators. Like they have big walk-in refrigerators to like slow down the fermentation process. So, I mean, it's like stepping into like a little piece of the old world that's been married with the new world. I mean, it's just
it's really fantastic.
A true gem. Like, we were so happy that we found it and sharing it with you guys. So now we're going to go to the next slide. Let's see. Okay. Now, this is a really wonderful example of like the quintessential storefront story. You know, we love the storefront.
We love the picture. If you could see it on your screen, there's a cat watching the caged birds. So, and just a hand-painted sign with the artwork, and
it's gorgeous.
We loved it.
And so this is E&N Pet Paradise, and now we're moving into another borough because we want to try to highlight, you know, for everyone This is in the Bronx, and this is on Gun Hill Road in the Norwood neighborhood of the Bronx.
Right.
And it's a family-run pet store that's been in business since 1973. And it's owned by Edgar Augie Santana.
Yeah.
And you know, when we first saw this place, we're like, oh my God, it's amazing. Look at all the lovely little pets outside. It looks so inviting.
Yeah.
Let's go inside. So when we got to speak with Augie, he told us, this is a really funny story of how I got started in the business, because, you know, we thought for sure that maybe like it had been his father's place or something like that. And he was like, no. What happened was I was working in a clothing store in Manhattan, and I was taking the bus home to the Bronx when I passed by this pet store. I noticed a sign in the store's window that said for sale. And I had just gotten married, and between my wife and I, you know, because this is a direct quote that I'm reading because it's better that I read it this way.
Yeah, he was amazing to talk
We
to.
had inside the store, that we had saved $5,000 to buy a house.
Buy a house.
And I got off the bus and I went inside the store, and the owner who was selling the business told me that it cost $5,000 to buy the business.
Oh,
So
God.
what did he do? He went home and he got them $5,000 that he and his wife had saved for their first house, and he bought the business.
Bought it.
And then he called his wife.
Called his wife.
So we can even only imagine that phone call. I mean, and he said to her, I got good news and I got bad news.
Yeah, the way he tells it is great.
Yeah. The good news is that I bought a business. Yay. But the bad news is that now we don't have any money left over to buy a house. And I don't know what her reaction was, but he told us his family's reaction. His family's reaction was that they thought he was absolutely crazy to buy that store. He said that they were throwing away his money, they told him, because the neighborhood at the time, this is the Norwood section of the Bronx, was primarily Irish and Jewish. And many people, his family said many people who lived in the neighborhood would never buy any pets from him because he was Puerto Rican. And when he opened the store, he proved them wrong, because his wife was with him every single day. Yeah. And his wife has red hair and green eyes and is very, very fair skin.
Right.
And she doesn't look Puerto Rican at all. No. And he told us that all the customers thought that she was the owner and that he was just the hired help.
Yeah,
and
they would go to her for the questions.
Right. And that was just fine with him. He said, let them think that, you know, I don't really care. I just want to be with my pets. Right. And he told us that the previous owner had sold mostly dog and cat supplies, but he didn't want to concentrate on that. So he took a huge risk and he changed the entire inventory to birds and fish, because he said he had spent so much time in Puerto Rico as a young child that he really loved fish and birds. He said every summer his parents would send him to Puerto Rico to visit his grandfather, because he said he was a troublemaker.
Yeah, they wanted to get him out of their hair.
Right. And, you know, maybe learn a lesson or something like that, a life lesson. Right. So they thought by sending me to Puerto Rico, that it would straighten me out. And he said his grandfather had a huge piece of land in Puerto Rico and raised pigs and had fish and birds as pets. Yeah, and his grandfather taught him how to take care of all the different animals. And he said he really loved doing it. And that's why he changed his inventory. He told us, and this is the best part of the story, in my opinion, is that he donates a lot of time and money to help the community. He goes to local nursing homes and hospitals, and he has helps set them up fish tanks for free.
Yeah, he takes
free
care
of charge.
He
goes in there, he sets up the whole tank, he puts the fish in it, and he even goes there to clean the tanks for free. Yeah. And, you know, to us, hearing that, like someone that gives back to the community, like out of the goodness of his heart, is everything. So and we hope, Augie, I mean, we know because of the coronavirus pandemic that he's probably not able to go into the nursing homes or hospitals anymore. But I hope that his fish tanks and all the fish are doing okay, because I'm sure they bring joy to you know, all the patients and the people that are at these.
If it's up to him, I'm sure they're fine.
Exactly. And he also told us that his daughter teaches autistic children, and she often would bring her kids on field trips to the store. And
he would give each one of them a little goldfish.
He said it's better than going to the Bronx Zoo, because first of all, it's free. Right. And second of all, they get to spend time personally with the animals. Yeah. And then like he lets them interact with the animals and it makes them so happy. And then because they get each a goldfish for free, it helps them learn, you know, how to take care of something. So that's That's super. I mean, when we heard
Yeah.
that, we're just like, oh my God, this
Yeah.
guy is like the nicest man in the entire world.
Amazing neighborhood place.
Yeah, they're definitely still open. I checked on that. So if you guys need a pet or
Right.
want to fish, I mean,
Right.
what a great pet while
Yeah.
you're quarantining.
He
during
goes
the
in
coronavirus.
365 days a year.
Yeah, he told
Just
us that he doesn't even close the shop really because he can't. He's like, even on a holiday, I go in there to check on his animals. This is how
Right.
much he loves like his
Right.
animals so much. And
Right.
then he also told us
Yeah.
that he won't sell to somebody that he doesn't think is going to take good
Yeah,
care.
we've seen it. It's like if you want to go in there and buy a bird or a fish, it's like going
Right.
before the Jedi Council. Like to Star Wars fans, they'll know exactly what I mean. You have to like, he answers all these questions. It's very serious. He puts you through like the ringer.
Right.
Like,
he wants to make sure that you know, will take care of of his pets.
his
because,
pets. Yeah.
yeah, they're all his pets. And
Yeah.
he's just letting you, you know, watch them for
Yeah,
him.
he sent
kind of
people
a way.
away
Yeah.
to go think about it.
Yeah.
If
you
he's
know,
not sure of you, he'll say, go home,
right,
think about it. If you
on
still want it, come back in a week and I'll sell
Right.
you a
Maybe
fish.
they'll never come back. Maybe they'll go someplace
Yeah.
else. But to him,
It's
you know,
more
it's like a
important.
vetting
Right,
process,
right.
really.
Yeah, he's feeding them there on Christmas Day. So.
Yeah. So I'll give
Just
you
a great place.
we love you.
Yeah.
So next slide. Now we're back into Manhattan now.
Yep.
This is Fayeco's Pork Store, and it's on Bleecker Street in the West Village. And it was established in 1900 by Eduardo Fayeco, and it's now being run by the 4th generation members of the Fayeco family. And I'm telling you right off the bat that one of the reasons why they're still in business, because they're right on Bleecker Street, it's a really, you know, the area become very, very expensive, is because they own the building that they're located
Yep.
in. Now, prior to the coronavirus pandemic, I would say for sure, 100% for sure, that the number one reason why businesses were
Yep.
closed, and that, like I said, you know, our Storefront book, the first book, over, you know, over 85% of the stores are closed. Most of the reason they closed is because
They
the
didn't own it.
owner did not own the building that they were located
Right,
in.
exactly.
So they only rented the storefront space. They didn't own the entire building. But Fayacos, they do own the building. And in fact, when we spoke with Louis Fayeco, who is the 4th generation co-owner, he told us that's the reason why they're still in Greenwich Village, is that his, you know, family was smart enough years ago to buy the building.
Right.
And we're like, oh, well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We're glad you have that. I mean, certainly with the coronavirus pandemic, just I don't want you to be misguided and think that just because somebody owns the building, that is like they're save all.
Right.
You know, owning a building is fantastic, and that it gives you security that you're not going to be kicked out by like a greedy landlord that raises the rent. But I mean, owning a building comes up with its own
expenses.
right. You know, you have to pay taxes and upkeep, and you know, if there's apartments above it, you have to maintain those as well. So it's not like you're save all.
Right.
Which, by the way, I want to say, just diverging from Fayeco's,
Right.
the very first slide that we showed, which was that you don't have to go back to it, Ayanna, but just to refresh everyone's memory, that was C.O. Bigelow Apothecaries.
Right.
Now, that's been around for so long, you would think that for sure the Ginsburg family owns the building.
You would.
And they do not.
Nope.
We specifically asked Ian, and he's like, nope, they rent. So don't feel like just because a business has been around for 100-something years that they own the building. Oftentimes they rent. I mean, they're doing okay. You know, they have a good agreement with their landlord, but I mean, you never know. Those things can change.
Yep.
So back to Fayeco's. And when we went into Fayeco's and he told us that the family owns the building, we're like, oh, well, that's great. I mean, I imagine because you're, you know, make Italian sausages, that's what their specialty is, their pork sausages, that your family had a pork store back in Italy, right? And he's like, no. It was purely kind of by accident that we even got involved in the pork making business. And I said, oh, well, do tell.
Yeah.
So Louis told us that his great-grandfather emigrated from Naples, Italy. And what he did is one day, he went into a sausage shop on the Lower East Side, because that's where like basically everybody lived back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, there was Greenwich Village was like a farmland even.
Right.
I mean, there was obviously some homes, but there was like, you know, that was a richer neighborhood where everybody, a lot of poor immigrants were packed down on the Lower East Side. He said he went into the Lower East Side sausage shop to buy Italian sausage. He got it. He went home. And he went to go, you know, have it, and he found a splinter in it. And he went crazy. The way Louis describes it, that he marched right back to the shop where he had bought the sausage, and he started screaming at Italian to the owner and accused him of not knowing anything about making sausages.
What he's doing, yeah.
Right, like, you don't know what you're doing.
You're a
How
shoemaker.
dare you?
Yeah.
And then he told them, you know what I'm going to do? You know nothing. I'm going to open my own shop, and I'm going to sell Italian sausages, and I'm going to put you out of business because you don't deserve to even have a shop. And that's exactly what he did. He opened a store, and that was the birth of Fayecos. And
so
then,
it wasn't that they were into it back in Naples. It was pure spite.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So to us, this was like not only like a true immigrant success story, but also like the funniest like way of how
and
it
you
happened.
can imagine the people in the original pork store laughing at him like, yeah, go ahead, sure you are.
Right, like they thought he was probably, just,
and he did.
Crazy to say that he was going to open his own pork store and put him out of business. And he did. That store closed, of course. And Fayecos is still around today.
Yep.
And we said, well, what's the key? Like, why are your pork sausages, why did you last so long where other, Italian sausage places probably went out of business? And he said, really, making sausages, Italian sausages like we do is really very simple. That the plain sausage that they make actually right on the premises at their Bleecker Street store consists of fresh pork shoulder, salt, and pepper. And that's it.
That's it.
But he said the key to their sausage is that they bone and trim all the meat by hand.
Yep.
And we watched them do this. In fact, we have a YouTube channel, James and Karla YouTube channel, where we went inside Fayecos and
watched the
process of them making and filmed it of making their pork sausage. And he said, doing the boning and trimming by hand, that's the key to a good sausage.
Yep.
Plus, he said they use really, really high quality meat.
They pick out the meat themselves. They don't just pay a broker.
Exactly. So we really love that story. I think we have one time for one more.
Yeah, we do.
Because we want to leave some time for Q&A as well. So let's.
Always go, if you go they have the sandwich.
Right. Fayecos
we got to mention.
Only sell like the meat because they have, butcher meat too. You can buy it by the pound.
Right.
But they have an excellent sandwich.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. And it's big enough to split. You
they
can
have
go eat
lots
it in
of
the
different
park.
sandwiches. Like, you can get a prosciutto, but we love their caprese.
Yeah, you could go eat it in Father Demos,
Right down the block.
Right.
We love their caprese, which is their homemade mozzarella. Sliced with fresh tomato.
And it's great because at lunchtime, all the firemen are filing in there to get their sandwiches. So
exactly.
It's good.
They know.
They know.
So I want to share with you B&H Dairy Lunch.
Yep.
And to us, we are East Village residents.
Yep.
In fact, we've lived in the same apartment now for like 25 years in the East Village. And this store is everything to us. It's not a store, it's a restaurant. It's actually a dairy restaurant. So this is from like the 1940s. B&H at the time was like the initials of the owner's names, and it was owned by a Jewish couple, and they specialized in dairy. So in the Jewish dietary laws, like you can't mix meat and dairy. So you can have a delicatessen or a restaurant that serves meat, like Second Avenue Deli was located just down the street from where this is. This is in the East Village on 2nd Avenue, close to St. Mark's Place. So just a few doors down from the corner of St. Mark's Place. Right by where Gem Spa used to be. Sadly, it closed this year. But what happened was, in a strange twist of fate, which we love about this store, is that it still serves kosher dairy. So they just have like omelets, matzo brie, as you can see on the sign, beautiful French toast and sandwiches, like a tuna melt sandwich. But they don't serve any meat. So it's just dairy. And it's really, so you could consider it vegetarian. Now the owners, and they're not Jewish anymore, they say that B&H stands for better health, because it's like everything is kosher certified, and it's also can be, for vegetarians. And it's owned now by two people. It's
Nicest
a couple.
Yeah,
just like we're a married couple and we work together. It's owned by Ola and Fawzi Abdalawad. Now, Ola is a Christian of Poland. She's from Poland. She's an immigrant from Poland. And she married her husband, Fawzi Abdalawad, who's a Muslim from Egypt. So the two immigrants owning this business, and they're non-Jewish at all, but they're still serving Jewish kosher dairy food.
Ola used to work across the street. If people in the neighborhood remember, Stage Restaurant.
Right, that was a
Next
place,
to the Orpheum.
Right,
Yep.
Stage Restaurant was another old little restaurant. It just had like a little
lunch counter.
Lunch counter. It didn't even have a bathroom or any tables, just a lunch counter. But
Right.
B&H, that's how she met Fawzi, and then they ended up,
Yeah.
working together and owning the restaurant together. If you go inside B&H, I mean, now of course, sadly, there's no more indoor dining, but they had the little, counter stools plus some seating, but they've built an outdoor area.
Right.
They've been through it all. I mean, back in 2015, there was the big gas, or was it just 5 years ago, or was it 10 years ago? I can't even remember.
But they had the gas
They
explosion.
had the big gas explosion and fire right on the corner of 7th Street at 2nd Avenue.
Where Love Saves the Day used to be.
Right, where Love Saves the Day used to be. And sadly, they were forced to close because of the big gas explosion and fire, because, it was just a few doors down from their restaurant, and then their gas got turned off. So they went through that, they survived that. And then here now in 2020, they faced a lot of difficulties. So they really need your support, because first of all, they got vandalized during the protests. Sadly, their window was broken, and they had very scary for them. They had to replace that.
Yep. Their cash register was stolen like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, just maybe 2.5 weeks ago, something like that. Somebody broke their window that they had just replaced, yet again broke it, stole the cash register. In fact, Ola found it around the corner on 7th Street. They'd taken all the money, so they had to deal with that. And then just the other Saturday morning, we live just a few blocks away. We heard all these sirens early in the morning at 5 a.m. It turns out there's huge six alarm fire directly, kind of diagonally across the street from them, on the corner of 7th Street and 2nd Avenue. Right. The big building, had caught on fire, and it went into the church next door. And they were open that Saturday, but then they were forced to close for a few days because the fire department was demolishing the building. And I mean, I don't know what else they can be thrown
because we
at
went
them.
there on Sunday and the street was closed.
Right, so they couldn't open, and Monday they weren't open as well. So I can't trust you that they really could use your support. Not only, if you're not in New York and you can't go there or order takeaway, they used to be a cash only, but now they're contactless. So they've tried to change with the times.
Buy a t-shirt.
Yeah, they have merchandise and things like that. So they could really use. Really use their help.
They make homemade challah bread.
Yes, they make homemade challah bread, and because they're different immigrants, one speaks Egyptian, one speaks Polish. They also have a lot of help that are Hispanic.
And they all speak Spanish.
Right, speak Spanish. So it's like a little United Nations in there.
Inside, they're great, wonderful people. You have a wonderful meal. You have a great time.
Yeah, really wonderful people.
Ola's funny and just a great person.
Yeah, so that's like I said, we want to definitely leave time for some Q&A.
Yeah, we have time.
And so let's roll it over to MAS and find out if anybody has any questions for us, because we'd be happy to answer.
Hi, James and Karla. That was wonderful. Thank you both so much. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. I will read some questions from the audience. One question that came in is asking more in terms of your process.
Okay.
Robert Rips, and he asks, how hard was it to get the photographs in terms of getting the sidewalks clear of people or camera placement? Did you have to go back multiple times to ask any of the locations to get the right light or a better time of day?
Yes, and yes to all the things that you mentioned.
Thanks for appreciating that, Robert.
Yes, you noticed something very important when just looking at our brief slideshow, is that kind of a hallmark that we did very early on in the project, because we've been documenting these, a lot of our photos. The first book is entirely 35mm film. So this was not digital, because digital didn't even exist.
Right.
We started taking these photos in the late 1990s, early 2000s with our 35mm film camera. And yes, oftentimes we would get to some place and there'd be a big UPS truck parked in front, or some delivery truck. And if the street was really narrow, that the sidewalk was narrow too, we couldn't shoot the store. So I used to write it down I used to carry a little scrap, a little notepad book, one of those tiny ones that are maybe 2 inches by 3 inches. have a pen with me, and I used to write down like the name of the store and the street address, like go back to. And
Right.
then I took that sheet of
Right.
paper.
It would be
I mean,
studying the alternate side schedule.
right. But sometimes, honestly, we didn't get to go back. I mean, I'd write it down a little scrap of paper, and then it would get washed inside my pocket, and then I'd forget about
Right.
it. I mean, it was really a very poor way of doing
Yeah.
things. But, you know, for us, the project started as a labor of love. Like, we just fell in love with the way these stores looked.
Right.
We wanted to document them, and we weren't showing them to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, this
No.
was all very personal. Like, we just kept us shoe boxes and shoe boxes
Shoeboxes full of little.
full of these photos, because this is before like really the internet and sharing things online. Certainly, I
Right.
mean, there was no social media of any sort
Right.
back then. We were just doing it for ourselves. So yes, oftentimes we did have to go back. I mean, I tried to be, you know, careful about it. And if there was a particular storefront that we loved, we'd write it down
Right.
and just be like, oh, there was too many sun streaks on it. Let's go back like on a cloudier day
Yeah.
or whatever. Or maybe like something was parked in front, or
Right.
maybe it was closed. Like we
Right.
loved it, but then the gate was pulled down.
Right, for
So
some
just like,
reason. Right.
oh, let's go back and reopen, because, you know, a lot of stores, like, yeah, they have a schedule, but if they're owned by a family,
Yeah,
you know,
family
what
and
if you,
things come up.
right, things come up, you get sick, and if no one else is there, then guess what? The
Right.
store doesn't open, you know, no
Yeah.
one else has the keys, and no one else really cares to open. So yeah, that's a great question.
We always said we work very hard to make it look easy.
Right,
We wanted the storefront just to, no distractions, just like you were standing in front of it.
right. As you saw from our photos, most of the time we chose specifically very early in the project not to have people in the
Right.
photos. And that was a conscious decision that we made early on, because we didn't want to date the photo, because we
Right.
felt like some of these, they look timeless. Like the photo of the store, like maybe the store was like, you know, went up in 1930s,
Mhm.
that it actually looked like the 1930s,
Right.
besides the fact that we were shooting in color. But if we had made it black and white, it could
Yeah,
be a
it could
photo
be just
from
like you were
the
there.
Depression era, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So,
So
yeah,
that was
that
a
was
great question, Robert.
great
Thank you.
question. Yes.
Thank you. I think this next question kind of speaks to some similar comments that you just made, but more about the selection process,
Mhm.
about which storefronts to photograph, maybe a bit more about your research process. I mean, so much is getting the history from the owners. So maybe you can share a little bit more about that.
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, for us, just like we mentioned during the talk, it started out very, very visually oriented.
Yeah, just
so,
the patina in the
Right.
look of the storefront.
It was all
whether
about-
it was the lettering.
right, it was all about how the storefront looks, whether
Right.
it was a big neon sign that we were attracted to,
Right.
hand painted sign in the window, or even like a window display. We love old stores that have window displays, and that's something that, you
Right.
know, unfortunately is like kind of like a dying breed. A lot of new stores really don't care about their windows, especially chain stores. They're
Yeah,
the
forget it.
worst.
Yeah.
I mean, like the
But it
chain,
used to be an art form of like even just lettering the little cards that would tell the prices.
right, window dressing was a big,
Right. It
big
was a
art in
huge
of
thing.
itself. So
Right.
yes, in our selection process was more like what we liked. Like
Right.
we had to be attracted
Right.
to it. So
and
there
I'd
was,
like to say we had a system, but we would just
no,
randomly walk
no,
around.
there was no system.
There was no research. There was no system.
No, we just said, let's walk around this neighborhood. We're
Yeah.
big walkers. We've always, I mean, now we have our dog Hudson, but at the time we had a dog called Tabasco, and also another dog named Java. This is how old the project dates back. This is our third dog.
Right.
So we would walk with our dog all around. And I mean, if we couldn't bring our dog, like if it was a far-flung neighborhood,
Right.
we'd say, oh, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's go to, you know, Norwood in the Bronx. And that's how
Right.
we found E&M Paradise. We would take the train,
Right.
and then we would just pop off at a random, like,
And
you know,
just
we
walk
didn't,
the neighborhood.
we didn't really have a destination.
Right.
Like we would just say, let's go to this neighborhood. We haven't really looked around here before. And then we would just start walking around and looking around. And
Right.
oftentimes, and I can tell you that we were so disorganized about it that we
Yeah.
would get so enthralled by like a store on one side of the street that we would forget to simply turn
Just turn
around
around.
and look
Right.
opposite, like what was on the other
Right.
side of the street.
Right. We'd be
because-
all pumped up coming out of E&M Paradise, and we walk away and there's a donut shop across the street.
Right, with an old sign, and we
Right.
totally wouldn't see it because we were so focused on that
Right.
one
And so
side of the
excited.
street.
Right.
You know, because people were like, oh, you know, did you map it out? Did you
Right.
like, you know, make a little map of where you went and where,
Right.
what
I
you
wish
did?
we
And we're
did.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been a very good thing. But to
Right.
us,
Right.
it was like, that would have been like work.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
then it's a job assignment. For
Right.
us, it's just like, go to a place, just
Yeah.
start walking around and photographing what you liked. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's an
And then we
adventure.
went in and started listening to what they had to say.
Right. And
And-
then that's what, like I said, that's when the project to
Right.
us really took off, because finding out these fascinating stories that the owners had to share with us, it
Right.
drove us to keep on photographing more.
Right, to represent the pride they showed in the stories they told. We knew we had to do the project right
Exactly.
with the same amount of intensity they showed in telling us it. So,
Right, but I honestly can say that sadly, I wish we had been like maybe not as focused on the visual aesthetic in the beginning, like in the late 90s, early 2000s,
Right.
because I can tell you in our own neighborhood of the East Village, I can count at least probably like 12 places that closed that we did not photograph because we thought they would always be there. Like
Right.
we took them for granted in our own neighborhood,
Right.
which is like, oh, why take a photo of that? You know, because this was film, so film costs money to us. So
Right.
to us, we're like, is it film worthy?
it
And
had
we're
to be
just like,
film-worthy, right?
oh, that will be there. Let's not bother with that one now. You know, we can get that tomorrow. But then, of course, that tomorrow, you know,
Mhm.
we would like, you snooze, you lose. And
Right.
honestly, we did lose in a lot of ways.
A lot of ways.
We should have documented everything. I wish we had, but
Right.
yeah, there really was no
No,
rhyme or reason. It was just more like what we were attracted to. But now we try to document everything. You know, we
Everything,
really
yeah.
do, because we realize how precious they are.
Right.
And basically it's a march against time to try
Right.
to photograph them and properly before they disappear.
Right.
So yeah, thanks for that great question.
Great. There's another question in the chat that says, the size of these small businesses are often occupying smaller storefronts. What
That's right.
role does the size of the storefront have to do with these business owners' ability to start their business? Some of the new spaces in new buildings are so big. How
Right.
can we make space for these unique businesses?
That is an excellent point.
another great question.
And I can tell you for sure, just using, for instance, in our own neighborhood of the East Village
Right.
and the Lower East Side, because, you know, East Village is part of the Lower East Side, that many of the storefronts are very small in size because they're located in the bottom of a tenement building. And the tenement building itself is a very small, like
Footprint,
footprint.
yeah.
And honestly, that is the key to the survival of why there's so many mom and pop stores or independently owned businesses still today in the Lower East Side and the East Village. And they may not be the original ones, but when a small, like a little mom and pop store closes, like it's replaced by another mom and pop store. And yes, you are right. When a new building gets built, oftentimes the retail space is huge. I know on 14th Street, I can think of a wonderful example between Avenue A and B. There used to be row after row after row of little mom and pop stores. We
Yep.
documented. It's not in our book, but we documented it. We have photos of it. It just didn't make it into our books.
Right.
And there was a pizza place and there was a hair cutters.
Fashion world.
Right. They all got torn down because some big developer bought up all the little tenement buildings and they knocked them all down.
Yep.
And now it's a big glass condo. And in the bottom of it, I mean, I
It's
don't
a
even,
Target.
right. I wasn't even going to say the word of what it is, but yeah, it's a chain
Right.
store.
But on the side streets, the footprint's small, so it's preserving them.
Right.
So-
So yeah, it's a huge, I mean, no small independent shop can afford a big footprint. I mean,
No.
that's just a given fact with the rents, the way things are, especially in Manhattan, but even the outer boroughs.
Right.
So unfortunately,
Right.
it's a big problem.
And there's a little shop we just visited, Katinka, that's actually between two tenements.
right.
In the alleyway, they just put a roof over it, and that's the store.
Right. In the East Village. So it's not even an actual, I mean, they created the storefront between like an alleyway.
Right.
So, and there's a shoe store on the upper West Side.
Just the same thing.
The same thing.
Yeah,
So,
so-
people can be really creative in finding, you know,
So in a way, those little spaces are helping.
right. That definitely helps. But again, the rent is a big factor because even in the East Village, you think, well, how much could it possibly be for a tiny little storefront? And I know because on our own block is a little store that's going out of business. I mean, they're closing this month. I will, it's an eyeglass shop. And I asked the owner, I said, how much you paying? He's like, well, we lost our lease. And that's this tiny little space. I mean, it's tiny.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's 300 square feet. No.
No.
I don't even think
It's-
so. Probably like the 200 square feet,
Right.
if that, is like 7,000 a month, and they're raising the rents. So I forget to what it was, but maybe
Right.
it was like 9 or 10,000. So you think that these little spaces would be cheap, but they're not. I mean, and this is true everywhere, really, Brooklyn, Queens,
Right.
everywhere. So it is a big problem. And that's something that, other groups are trying to help, like with rent regulation and,
Yep.
and doing things. I mean,
Anything you can do.
right. To us, it's the most important thing that you can do as a person right now to ensure that your mom and pop store survives is to shop in it.
Yep.
I mean, they need the customers. That's the bottom line. Whether they own the building, don't own the building, it really doesn't matter.
Yep.
I mean, of course it matters, but they need you and they need your support.
Now more than ever.
Now more than ever, whether you can go in there and shop in person, if you can't, you know, because of the pandemic or other reasons, which you're far away. I mean, I know somebody that's listening is from India. Obviously, they're not coming to New York anytime soon. But, you know, some of these have online presence as well. So you can support online even by buying a gift certificate to give as a gift or whatever it is, you know, some merchandise. So yeah, excellent question. Thank you.
Absolutely. We have to show up for our small businesses and support them. We have a lot of questions in the chat or in the Q&A, but I think we have time for maybe just one or two more questions. And then for any questions we may not get to, maybe we could follow up with folks by email.
Sure.
The next question here, someone asked if you ever have considered photographing street vendors or their carts. So kind of similar to what you just discussed in scale, on the very micro level, a different kind of vendor there.
Yes, we do. We have. And I mean, they didn't make it into our storefront book because obviously, you know, we had to stay focused on one thing, but we always photograph, you know, in Chinatown, the guy, you know, he fixes shoes on the street, and there's another guy that fixes watches.
Yeah, and they make those little donut things.
Oh yeah, the little donut, like there's like these little mini cake vendors, and the guy selling, you know, even the halal guys. I mean, now they have physical stores, but they started just selling, you know, from their cart. Yeah, we have photos of them. In fact, in our book New York Nights, we did include one of the food cart vendors.
Yeah,
because
First and First.
Yeah, it was right on by Houston Street.
Yeah, First
and
Street.
you know, he had his cart like really elaborately lit at night, and to us it just glowed, and we're like, oh wow, that's like the beacon, like we really attracted to that. So yes, we love the food cart vendors, and I mean, I can tell you that we just walked up because we did a live stream, a walk to see, you know, all the Christmas and holiday windows up on Fifth Avenue. And normally there's lots of street vendors that would be there this time of year because of the tourists, and they're suffering because there's hardly any tourists. There's hardly anybody walking around. And I mean, I'm very concerned about their longevity as well, because they really do rely on tourism. I mean, you know, people don't realize it. You know, you don't like to think of that when you're a New Yorker, and I'm a born and bred New Yorker. I was born in the Bronx, but I mean, the tourism is a huge part, you know, of New York, and you know.
Got to mention Dosa Man. Washington Square Park.
Yes, Dosa Man. Yes, we've highlighted him too, and taken video of him making his vegetarian dosas.
Our dog Hudson loves all it.
Yeah, yeah.
He knows them all by name.
Hudson goes everywhere with us. At least we try. Not when we have to take the subway, but yeah, we love the food cart vendors. They're an important part of the landscape as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much. I think we are actually out of time for additional questions, but we will invite MAS President Elizabeth Goldstein to come back onto the screen, and maybe any closing remarks that James and Karla would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, maybe we should start with James and Karla. Anything that you'd like to finish up with quick?
Well, we of course want to thank the Municipal Art Society of New York for holding this gallery talk, and for the Freedman family for, you know, making this all possible, the gallery itself. So anybody that was able to see all the beautiful slides that we showed today, those are all stores that are not part of the gallery. So please go to the gallery and check out those as well, because those are all stores that are still open for business and could use your support. And and I think we want to talk about our giveaway now, right? Because we have signed copies of our storefront books to give away to some lucky listeners. So yeah, thanks again.
Well, thank you, James and Karla. It's enormously fun to hear you talk about these extraordinary parts of the New York landscape, and there couldn't be people who are more enthusiastic than you, and you inspire us all to engage even more heavily than we might have otherwise. And thank you to everybody who has joined us today. We're so delighted that you could join us for this program. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who is jotting down names to put onto my holiday shopping list. So I hope you were all doing the same. And I certainly will be looking at the streets of New York and the storefronts of New York with special reverence as well. I want to thank my colleagues at MAS, Iana, Jackie, Tara, and Megan for their extraordinary work in putting these programs together, and this one in particular, and managing the logistics throughout. I hope that if you're not already a member of MAS, that you will consider doing that. Your membership dollars and donations help us continue our programming like this, and also to support our advocacy and policy work. We hope that you'll stay tuned for upcoming MAS programs and tours by visiting mas.org/events. And please, again, don't forget to visit mas.org to view James and Karla's other beautiful photographs in the exhibition and previous features that we've had in the Freedman Gallery. Our next exhibition will debut in late January. And just a reminder, we'll be pulling names from the people who attended today, and we'll be sending out our winners to James for James and Karla's books very shortly following the program. So thank you for joining us, and we wish you all happy holidays, and in this strange year, finding comfort and joy in wherever you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.